Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so happy that you're here. I am Roseanne DeTorres. I'm the managing partner of DeTorres and DeGeorge Family Law, and I'm also the chair of NJBIA's Women Business Leaders Council. So glad you could make it for this month. I want to give a big shout out to our Vice Chair, Lorena Mascara of LWNH Business Solutions, who runs our tech so expertly. And also to Vicki Hart of Paradigm Marketing and Design, our Marketing Minute partner. And last but not least, our presenting sponsor, PSE&G. We are going to incorporate some networking into the event, so please do stick around for that a little bit later. And now a quick word from NJBIA, Kate.
Hi, thank you so much. We at NJBIA are thrilled that this group continues to grow and thrive. For those of you who are new to NJBIA, we are the largest statewide business association in the country, representing approximately 1 million jobs in the state of New Jersey. If you're interested in more info on us, I will drop the website in the chat along with my contact info. Feel free to be in touch and we will get you whatever you need. Thank you.
All right. Now,
and you know what, we finally just, and I apologize, we had a little bit of an issue with the partner slide, but I do want to make sure that you guys are recognized. We do want to thank our partners, NJM Insurance Group, Paradigm Marketing, and of course, PSE&G. So we want to make sure we give them a huge shout out because without them, we would not be able to run the event effectively. So I apologize, it took me a little bit to get this up.
No problem at all. It is my distinct pleasure now to introduce to you Robin Rotenberg. She went from a summer camp counselor to special education teacher, lawyer, communications professional, and now author. Her most recent corporate positions were as president of a $1 billion Canadian business and as the head of corporate communications for North America for a large transnational company. Her recent book, Pound On, From the Glass Slipper to the Glass Ceiling, is a collection of inspiring stories from trailblazing alpha women. I know I see one of those alpha women on the Zoom call today. Sally Glick is out there. I think she's in Robin's book. And take it away, Robin.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for the great introduction. I really appreciate it. And thank you to everybody for joining today. I think it's really a great time for all of us to get together and have a chat about alpha women and becoming alpha and all the things that we can do in advancing our careers. One of the things that I found the most interesting about writing a book and about talking about my journey was when you look back on it, sometimes people will say, well, how did you do that? And how did you do all of it? What I've been asking myself is why I did it. Why did I do that? Why did I embark on some of the things that I did? And I love change. So part of my evolution as an alpha was to change tracks, to change things that I've been doing, and to allow myself the opportunity to try to grow and thrive in a different environment. And that's how I ended up running the subsidiary for the company that I worked for that large Canadian business, was just by taking a chance and also by making my own rules, which is a real mantra of mine that you'll hear me talking about quite a lot today. And it's also featured in my book, Pound On, that when you look at your own journey and the types of things that you want to accomplish, it's really important to make your own rules about it and determine what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, and not really do things for other people or listen so much to others. The important thing to remember about becoming alpha is that it's really an evolutionary process, and we think of change as somewhat of a revolution, but we've evolved and we continue to evolve as women in our careers and as alpha women. It doesn't happen overnight. What's revolutionary about it is that women are perceived as alphas, or we're seen as alphas, much more so now than in any other point in history, because we're not only the gatherers, we're also the hunters. So we have taken on these many different roles, and we see ourselves differently too. And one of the things that I have in the slide presentation that everybody will get afterward is a timeline of women's rights and achievements in the US over the past couple hundred years. And it's really remarkable when you think about how far we've come and how women now, even only 100 years in, have the right to vote, for example. So when I talk about myself, I talk about all women and the types of things that we've evolved into and how we can evolve in our careers, and to try to give some inspiration and motivation for all of us to carry on, dream big, follow our dreams, and never give up. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Yeah, thank you for that. So you said something that I want to ask you about, which is, why you did, why you evolved through these different phases. What did you come up with when you asked yourself that?
A lot of it is really unanswerable in the sense that I changed things, but I didn't necessarily plan them. And that's one of the things I'm really trying to do with Pound On, is encourage other women to plan a little bit more, because I kind of fell into things. I mean, the summer camp counselors, my parents shipped me off from the time I was 3 or 4 all day long, and then to overnight camp when I was 7 or 8. So I learned a lot about independence and how to fend for myself and how to deal with what I describe as the mean girls, because I was always the nerdy girl on the outside of all the cool kids. So you learn a lot about yourself. But in terms of my career, I just would take on what other people offered me and try to do the best that I could at whatever I had. I had always wanted to be a lawyer. I got a little bit sidetracked when I went to teachers college because I loved kids, and I had worked as a summer camp counselor and doing arts and crafts activities for a Parks and Rec association in the college town that I went to. And then I was happy as the general counsel of a big billion-dollar Canadian company. And one day I got a call from a board member saying, "The president's retiring, do you want his job?" And I thought about it quite a lot and thought, well, okay, I think I could do that. But the interesting thing too is that with every step of the decisions that I made, I was being told by other people, don't do it, you won't like it, it'll be too hard, it's too much responsibility. Even when I went to law school, I had a lot of opposition. I'm sure you did too, that, well, why would you want to do that? So part of why I did things was because other people thought I couldn't do them.
Mm-hmm. I really resonate with that.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
Yeah. I was so happy to get out of my household with 6 siblings. I couldn't wait to get out of there. So when I told them I was going to law school, they were like, "See you later."
Yeah, right. Free up a bedroom, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what does an alpha woman like you do during the pandemic? How do you cope? How do you deal with this new reality?
I think that's a really interesting question. And I think the things that I do are things that all of us can do as alphas. One of them is to find some time for ourselves, because I've found that, as Lorena was saying at the beginning, I'm even more busy now than I was when I was going to an office every day, because everything is in my house. I live where I work. I go to my gym where I work. I socialize where I live, rather. So everything is where I live. But I've tried really hard to find time for myself. Another thing that I try to do is to stay connected. And with technology, if it works, it's really good to stay connected to other people. It makes me feel a lot less isolated. We can use text, we can use email, we can do this, we can Zoom, we can pick up the phone. The other thing that we can do is try to find ways to advance what we're trying to do professionally. If we do, you hear me say, if we do one thing every day to advance our careers, in a month, we've done more than 25 things. That can be to go on LinkedIn and refresh. It can be to come and to speak with people. It can be to make a connection with somebody who can help you with your career, or even spend some time doing a little research about what you want to do next. I have now learned how to use Instagram. I don't know if you've seen me on there, but I've learned to do live videos and post them, and to try to connect outside of my own circle. So connection has to do with not only your own little circle, but the big broad world, and how do you get out in there? And also to give back, to try to give something back. How do we give back? Yesterday was Giving Tuesday. I've been really struck, and not necessarily in a good way, with the need, especially in the tri-state area, of how many people really have so little, and how do I help them? How can I help them? I have time, I have some resources. What do I do to help with the bread lines, with the people who can't feed themselves or don't have jobs? And the other thing is to plan. And I've started planning. I mean, I planned my day, but I didn't really plan my career as well as I maybe could have. And to plan and to evaluate. And that takes time. And during COVID, we have a little bit more time to ask ourselves every day. I had that practice when I was in corporate every day to go look back and see, what did I accomplish? What could I have done better? But I think when we have some time to reflect, we can reflect and then we can set some more goals. So I've tried to get outside my own head about feeling really isolated. I mean, I have a grandson I haven't seen since March. I see him all the time on Zoom. I haven't seen my daughter since then either. So I try to get outside my own head and figure out some ways to stay connected, to help people, and to plan a little bit for the future.
Yeah, so alpha women are flexible and adaptable. So
yes,
that seems to be what you're saying there. We've taken the circumstances we find ourselves in, and we rise up to live within that construct in a way that's still where we're still able to meet all of our goals. There's a lot of great comments in the chat. I know you're not looking at that right now, about the wonderful aspect of giving and using the gifts that you've been blessed with to help other people, not just on Giving Tuesday, but every day.
yes. No,
So
it should be all the time.
Exactly. And tell us, what are you doing career-wise right now?
Well, I left the corporate world in January, the corporate company that I'd been with for about almost 25 years. And I was going to step into the consulting world and do some more networking and finish my book and do some public speaking. And now this is my public, and to do some coaching. I had started writing Pound On about 2 years ago. Sally can tell you that I started doing the interviews for the alphas, because I want to give something back to inspire and to motivate the next generation and the current generation, but the women coming up behind us, to try to give them some inspiration, particularly in the face of the Me Too and Time's Up movements that have been such negative stories, especially for women embarking on their careers or trying to change career paths. And the idea was to tell stories of women in attainable careers. I mean, we're not rich and famous, worldwide known people, but we have good stories to tell about how we persevered and what kinds of things we can teach others. And that was the idea behind it. It took me about 2 years to write the book, including all the interviewing, because alpha women are sort of like herding cats to try to get 7 stories interviewed in the book. And to do some teaching around it and around becoming alpha, because I developed an axis that you can determine what phase of alpha you're in. And then I have some tips in a scoring guide about how you can advance to the next level, so that we're always learning and growing. But for me, it's around coaching, speaking, giving back, and also writing books. And I've also, during the quarantine, because you'll find if you lock me up, I'll find new things to do. So I started writing children's books with little life lessons. And I found an illustrator who, interestingly, because of technology, I never actually talked to, but he did these beautiful illustrations for the books. The first one is about a little boy who finds a glass slipper in a field of purple roses, but the glass slipper doesn't fit him. And how it's okay if you don't fit into the shoe. You can still fit into the world and find ways to enjoy the glass slipper and the purple roses. So that book carries the messages of acceptance of yourself and accepting others. And I have the next one that I did was a STEM book about space adventure, because I've always loved, I don't want to do it, but I've always loved watching people fly to the moon. So it's a story about Charlie, who's the main character, and his preparations for space flight. So I've also been trying to get those books into libraries and schools and trying to market those. So it's really, holistically, I've been starting a business. I just have a number of different aspects to it. And it's a lot different than walking into a place that's already established and they say, here's your desk, you go at it. Like, here's what you have to do. Everybody else has looked after everything. So it's been quite a learning experience for me to have my own company.
Yeah, but how much fun must that be for you to be in control of your own destiny and creating this content, these books, this educational material that you're so passionate about. So let's talk about Pound On and that book that you wrote about becoming alpha, and how it's an evolutionary journey. You mentioned that a little bit in the beginning, but tell us more about that and how you realized you had become alpha. It was like in hindsight, you look back and you say, I became alpha. And what does that even mean when you know that you are alpha, if you're an alpha woman?
I have a number of different phases that you just kind of go through to become alpha. So they spell alpha too, because I, as a teacher, I like things that are easy to remember, because then also I can remember them. But attempting alpha, learning alpha, professional alpha, hard driving alpha, and absolutely alpha. That's when we absolutely rock. So that's why my website is Alpha Women Rock. But there are different characteristics that we accumulate over time, and they're both intellectual and emotional. So I think that development as an alpha woman, as a career woman, or just personally, has to do with intelligence or IQ, and also emotional quotient or EQ. And we need both of them to really survive and thrive as an alpha woman. For me, I didn't really realize I was trailblazing or that I was doing anything differently. I just went into work and worked hard every day and thought that that was enough. I think some of it for me stemmed from the fact that my father had wanted a boy and ended up with 2 girls. So we both ended up in fields that are predominantly male run and male dominated. But for me, it was more in looking back. What I'm trying to do with Pound On is have it be somewhat more forward looking with the planning, so that other women can see, what do I need to do to get to the next level? How can I be more intentional about it, rather than just having it fall on me or having people offer me things? How do I really go after what I want? I started realizing that people were looking at me as having done something different when they came to talk to me for advice. And I thought, why are they asking me for advice? What do I have to tell them? But I was the first general counsel in that particular company. I was the first person in 150 years, the first woman to run an entity, one of their subsidiary entities, the first woman. I was the first and only woman to run their corporate communications department for all of North America. And I didn't realize how much of an outsider I was. I knew I never felt like I fit in, but I had never felt like I fit in. I'm back to sort of, like the summer camp with the cool kids kind of thing. And I was never one of the cool, popular girls. I was like the nerdy, smart girl. So I didn't fit in with any of them. So it wasn't really a big surprise to me that I didn't fit in the workplace either. And it took me a long time to realize that it's okay to be different. And that's part of the messaging in Pound On. It's okay to be different and to be yourself. You have to be true to yourself and be who you are. But the book is really around being a little bit more intentional about it. And the stories, rather than being, how are you today? How did you get where you are today? These stories go back to the roots of these women. And I know all these women. Some I've known for a short period of time, and some I've known for decades. And it goes back to who influenced you when you were growing up, who were your female role models. And I have in the front of the book also a list of interview questions that I asked them. So if any of my readers who are becoming alpha want to talk to another alpha around who are they and how did they get there, they have a roadmap for asking them those questions and to find out. And the book's not a textbook, although it does have a chapter on common themes, what the alphas all had in common, what we all had in common. And it also has a concepts chapter with footnotes, because I think we have to be conversant in the things that people talk about: glass ceilings, glass cliffs, gender differences. We have to have the vocabulary to be conversant about it, but we don't have to bog down to me, textbooks are bogged. I mean, I was in school till I was almost 30 years old. So, I don't want to read another textbook. I've done my time. But I think that we have to also be, we also have to have enough vocabulary to be conversant in these fields. But that's really what's in the book.
How do you know which alpha you are?
Well, in the book, I have, and also in the scoring guide, I have a list of characteristics for alpha women, and the characteristics are assigned points. So if you know how if you open up a magazine, it'll say, where are you on a scale of, how well are you kind of idea, and they'll have all these things and they ascribe points to them. So I determined a number of different characteristics and assigned points to them. And what you do is on the axis, you pick 10 characteristics that describe you at any given point in time, and you'll see how the points are ascribed to them, and you add up the points. Mm-hmm. And this is also in the presentation that I'm circulating afterwards. And then in the scoring guide, so if people want the scoring guide, I'm happy to give that out afterward too. It says, what does your scoring guide mean? What does your score mean? And it tells you, for example, 0 to 10 points is the first attempting alpha. The second one, learning alpha, is 11 to 25 points. And then it continues. And in the scoring guide, it has a tip sheet. What do you need to do at any given level? So if you get, say, the earliest, which is attempting alpha, one of the things is buy a suit, draft your resume. Things that we take for granted if we've been in the workforce for a long time. We have a resume. We have a whole closet full of suits. In fact, one of my articles recently in LinkedIn is about cleaning your closet in many ways. You have to get to a point where you clean your closet and you clean your network and you clean, whatever isn't serving you. But you find out your level and then tips. And then my suggestion is that we set a goal around the things that we want to accomplish to get to the next level, with milestones around how are we getting there. So we have goals and things that we want to achieve and strive for. So again, it's about planning, continual planning and evaluation, and trying to figure out how we can advance. And sometimes it'll show us that where we are isn't where we really should be. Mm-hmm. And then you vote with your feet and you find a different path.
I wonder, I would be curious to see how it compares when you score yourself versus when maybe somebody that's close to you scores you, and if you're really self-evaluating accurately. It'd be interesting to see. But the scoring guide is in the chat, and the matrix that you're talking about is going to be in the materials that you're going to distribute after today, correct? Okay,
yes,
great.
that's
all right.
correct.
Awesome.
And yes,
and actually, I already put the link on the chat as well for everyone to click on that. So,
oh, thank you, Lorena. But what's interesting too, Roseanne, is we rank ourselves too low. When all the women that I've talked to who have scored themselves, they all say, oh, I'm not at that level. I must be lower than that. So one of the learnings and one of the things I'm coaching women around is to really recognize our own attributes and abilities, and not think, oh, I don't have these, I can't apply for that job, I don't have them. Because we know statistically from all the studies that men will apply for jobs if they have like 2 out of the 10 qualifications that are listed. And women will look at it and go, well, I only have 8 of them, so I'm not going to apply. And we know that if we have a little encouragement, we can grow into all those things. But that's one of the things is we women will rank ourselves lower than other people will rank us or see us, or lower than we should be ranked. Mm-hmm. So that's what I get from a lot of women.
It's an interesting conversation I would love to have if we had unlimited time, about why women do that to themselves and how we can actually use different techniques to build confidence. There was a study, just real briefly, by a psychologist called Amy Cuddy, who talked about the power of presence and the use of body language and things like that to improve your confidence as a woman, so that you essentially you can become more alpha. Real quick, let's talk about all the pivoting that you did in your career, from camp counselor to $1 billion Canadian company. how did you do that? Why did you do that?
Well,
And
I think
any advice for anybody that might be on the program today that's thinking about a career change?
Sure. I mean, for me, we talk a lot now about pivoting and jumping. To me, I think more I jumped rather than just pivoted, because I changed, and I have an article on LinkedIn that I just published about that, because I think I changed fields so dramatically. It was in part that I just wasn't afraid of it. I just thought, well, it's all in English or French. I can figure this out. If I can't do it myself, I'll get somebody to help me. But I think part of it, and this is for everybody today, is to assess risk. Do you really want to do it? And what do you have to do to be successful at it? I think companies, by and large, don't give us enough support. We have to find our own support system around it. But we have to know our goals. What's our goal? Where is it going to get me? I mean, one of the things that I really struggled with when I ran that company was I had to step away as the lawyer of the company. And I'd been a lawyer for a long time, and that had been my dream. So for me to jump into a business role like that was not only a jump in terms of my career, it was also a jump in terms of how I identified myself and how I identified, excuse me, as a career woman and what I wanted to be. And I decided that it was worth the risk because it was a big challenge. I was intentional about it. I didn't settle. They didn't want to give me the title president, even though that was the job. And this is a whole other conversation. Every time I was given a job, they changed the title and downgraded it. So, which is a whole other story,
Wow.
not fit for print. There are a lot of things, the stories that I could tell that are not in Pound On about the things that I encountered in the workforce around how the first woman in various positions or women in various positions are treated. But I knew I had to fight to get what the people before me, all men, had in the same positions. And I wanted to set a good example for other women. And that's another thing to ask ourselves. How do we set a good example for other women in the things that we're taking? Because I knew that if I messed it up, they would never give it to another woman. And that's part of the glass cliff concept, where they often will give women high-level jobs in down economies or in businesses that are failing, because they'll say, well, it's not doing well anyway, so we'll take the risk. And then we fall off the cliff, not through any fault of our own. And then it justifies them not putting another woman in the job. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the concepts and the education and the research that I did for the book. And I think it's important to remember that. But assess the risk, know your goals, don't settle. If somebody offers you something and it looks really shiny or really great on the outside, it's not necessarily that on the inside. And do your homework about what the job really is and educate yourself and find your network. Are there other women or others who have been in those jobs who can give you a sense of what it's like? When they offered me the president job, they gave me overnight to think about it. Overnight. And I
wonder if they would have given a male
it would have been totally different.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally different. So that's part of why I wrote the book was, as I said, there are a lot of things that happened to me along the way that aren't in it, that I'm happy to share with people, not sort of in writing, but there were a lot of things I just felt that needed to be corrected. And if you're going to make a switch, do it with your eyes wide open, do it with intention, and find out as much as you can about the job and the people, and also how you can help other women with it, because we really need to help each other. And that's a big message in the book too, is I didn't have any female mentors. They made it pretty clear in the big law firm that I was at that the one woman partner made it pretty clear that nobody had helped her, so she wasn't helping any of us. And I've always carried that with me. I'll help people, even if it's only to have a coffee with them, because I think that, it really stuck with me how nasty that was, frankly, and unhelpful.
I feel like we worked at the same law firm.
I think they're all the same.
So
But
we have a
companies
couple.
aren't much better in the sense, and I'll just share with this group. I have, on Facebook, you're connected with half the world now. And I had a high school male friend who had asked me about the book. And he said, well, I don't think it's just about women in the workplace. I think it's about everyone. And it probably is about everyone. But I think if you haven't walked in those places as a woman, you just simply don't have the same experience. And I thought it was interesting and a little naive at the same time, but I just said, why don't you read the stories in my book and see what you think?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to get anywhere, by bashing people over the head. But I do agree that
you can't convince somebody that has never lived through something that something is happening.
No, absolutely, you can't.
Your story reminds me of Peggy McHale and Sandy Webster. I don't know if you know them. They were business consultants, and they sold their company and they made a great sale. But in the beginning, it was very difficult for them to get into that C-suite, and they would bring a guy with them to the presentations because everybody in the room would talk to the guy.
Sure.
But he was just the employee. He wasn't even the owner. But
Right.
it was somehow legitimized them to have this fellow in the room with them. Anyway, we only have a couple minutes left. Tell us, what would you like to add in the last 2 or 3 minutes, and maybe how can people use the book to improve their lives?
There's the score. Well, thank you.
So what I did,
much.
I'm going to show you this slides that you hadn't touched on because I was keeping track of when you were presenting. So these are the last 2 slides, and then you can open it up for questions.
Okay, thank you. So this is just to say what this is. This is part of the scoring guide. And as I was saying before, these are the characteristics. You can see I made an XY axis with the IQ and the EQ and just spoke to the various characteristics that alpha women have. And you take 10 of those and you add them up given what the points are. So that's the first part of it. Do you want to flip to the next one, Lorena? And then it tells you which alpha you are. So you can see attempting, then to the right is learning, then up in the third quadrant is professional, and the top right is hard driving alpha, and then absolutely alpha that's just in the middle with the glass slipper. That was just, you absolutely rock. But and then goal setting. Again, I think it's really important to always have goals. Otherwise the years just get away from you, or the months and the years get away from you. So what is it? What did you learn about your current alpha level? 3 ways under each goal that you can achieve it, and break them down into individual tasks with some dates. Now the scoring guide that you can get after with the link also has the tip sheets that I was talking about, that has, for the very early levels, has things like, as I was saying, buy a suit and write your resume. But the advice in terms of, I think it's just the last slide after that with the contact information. But I think one of the things to remember is to always make your own rules. Figure out what your rules are and the ones that are the most important to you. And my favorite rule that I made for myself is to make my own rules. I have lots of rules around speaking up in the first 10 minutes of a meeting, so that, because I'm actually quite shy, although people find that hard to believe once they know me. So I have to talk and hear my voice, which is kind of also an odd thing to become a trial lawyer after you're, hiding in the background for your whole life. But I think it's to find your voice wherever you are and to make sure that you speak up, and also to be true to yourself. That's a big one of mine. And to have integrity. I wish I had known earlier that a lot of people just aren't like me in the sense of having integrity. I had a law firm once overpay me, and I've told this story before, and I gave them the money back. They would never have found out, but I just couldn't keep it because it wasn't mine. But you find a lot of people along the way that don't have that same sense of integrity that you do, and you don't want to have that affect you and how you do things. But the other thing to think about really strongly about Pound On and about your career is your own personal brand. So I would encourage all of you, think about your own personal brand. And I did a little video on this now that I've learned to do videos on Instagram earlier this week about how to develop your own personal brand. And What do you want to be known for? How do you show up? How do you develop it? What's your elevator pitch? How do you network? All of those kinds of things around your own personal brand. And I help people a lot with that in my coaching, because we have to understand how we're perceived and also how others perceive us. And it has to align with how we want to be seen and what we want our brand to be. And it's not just at work. Your brand is everywhere you go. So think about your brand and how you treat people and about how you show up wherever it is you go. So I would say make your own rules, try to do some planning that's intentional. And thirdly, think about your personal brand and how you can develop that. Not something in during quarantine we can think about a little bit more, because we have the ability to really hone it when we show up. And I guess the last thought is what we started with, is to please give back. No matter what it is you think you give, may think it's really little, but it isn't. It's going to help other people a lot. And I don't think I said it at the beginning, but I was watching the news last night, and there's a woman who runs a food bank in New York that usually serves 40,000 people a year. And this year they've served 2 million people so far. So, and that the food part's really bothering me. And I'm really into the fundamentals of food and housing and literacy. You can see from the children's books and from also writing a book, but it's not, people won't learn to read, or they can't read if they don't have food. So I think we need to really evaluate how we give during this time going forward. So those are things that are important.